Drake is by far the most successful hip-hop and musical artist of our time and has achieved numbers that rival Michael Jackson, the Beatles, and Taylor Swift. But the ultimate test of such greatness is the ability to pass success onto the next generation of artists, guiding them through the treacherous music industry where a far majority of up-and-coming artists fail. Because not only does it extend one's legacy past their career, but it also proves that their accomplishments were not just luck. A common trend that successful artists have done for years in the music industry is to create their own label, essentially repeating the process they once went through, just with higher stakes. So Drake created his own label. However, can we really say there is anyone truly notable on Drake's OVO Sound label that has been successful enough to compare to him in the slightest? Given his level of commercial success and connections, shouldn't it be easier for him to pass the torch to his artists, or is he holding them back on purpose to eliminate competition from his home city of Toronto that breeds new and fresh sounds? Perhaps he just doesn't have time to devote to his artists' careers while he remains supreme. Today, we find out. Drake was actually in these artists' shoes only a decade ago. He was signed to Cash Money, Young Money Records joint venture led by Lil Wayne and Birdman, alongside Nicki Minaj, Tyga, and other soon-to-be superstars. But he individually was branded as the next rapper to take over Lil Wayne's spot as the best rapper alive. Lil Wayne took Drake under his wing, utilizing all the connections and pull he had in the industry to spotlight his music to the world, not to mention jumping on multiple tracks as a feature right after signing. That's all he really needed, the cosign. And years later, Drake has obviously done Lil Wayne justice with the risk he took on him. Drake's contract with Young Money Records would expire, and he would have to decide if he wanted to re-sign, sign to an entirely new label for an exorbitant amount of money, or start his own label. Because while his relationship with Lil Wayne was still intact, Wayne and Birdman's relationship was in shambles. For years, the two disputed over how much money Lil Wayne was owed from his royalties, by the end resulting in a $51 million lawsuit and hiatus from releasing music since Lil Wayne didn't want to give Birdman a dime more than he already took. As a witness of it all, Drake wanted no part in anything similar affecting his own career. So in 2012, long before he submitted enough projects to fulfill his end of the current record deal, Drake founded OVO Sound, an abbreviation for October's Very Own, with two other founding members, his sound engineer and producer 40 and manager Oliver El Khatib. His label was a joint venture under the Universal Music umbrella, specifically with Republic Records, and intended to focus on budding talent in the Toronto area where Drake was from. Since the label has signed a variety of talent such as PartyNextDoor, Smiley, Majid Jordan, T-Minus, Boy Wonder, and more importantly, himself. Starting in 2019, after the release of his album Scorpion finished off his contract with Cash Money.
Drake just re-upped with Warner Music Group with OVO Sound. That's his label. First of all, it was always interesting to me that he saw what the fuck was going on at Cash Money and he says, I don't want a YMCMB part 2. Right. I don't want a Young Money part 2. I want my own label over somewhere disconnected from Birdman and this whole system.
Drake being signed to his own label is not entirely uncommon. J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, and Travis Scott, to name a few, also release music under their own respective record labels. However, in their cases, they act and are treated like label owners since they actually have a large involvement in the creative process and promotion of the artists they signed, in some cases above their own solo careers. On the other hand, Drake has run into controversy regarding his record label, since he rarely, or at least ineffectively, promotes his label signees despite being the top-selling artist in the world, unlike his predecessor Lil Wayne. In fact, various signees of OVO have spoken out against Drake and his lack of support for their careers, some of which even left the label entirely. So with that being said, the question that comes to mind is, why and how does Drake run a major record label if he's not really fulfilling his role of taking their careers to the next level? The answer is darker than you may think. The OVO Sweatshop is a term that surfaced from various Reddit posts and coined by DJ Academics in his Twitch live streams and past talk show Everyday Struggle. The conspiracy describes how Drake allegedly exploits and/or neglects the artist in his OVO Sound label in order to maintain his status in the industry. Now obviously, his business may not be as poor of working conditions as a literal sweatshop, but the term caught on due to how OVO signees would allegedly sacrifice their own careers to write and produce for Drake later on, whereas other artists run music labels, such as Young Thug's YSL, proudly promote and collaborate with his artists, such as Gunna, as much as possible. Not to mention Thug's efforts to help Gunna surpass his own success for the betterment of both parties. Playboi Carti may not be actively advertising his artists in the same way, yet still draws immense attention towards them by associating them with his own brand and label, Opium. And because of this, Ken Carson and Destroy Lonely are undoubtedly among the top upcoming artists in the current generation. As for Travis Scott, he secretly featured Don Toliver within his highly anticipated album Astroworld, in turn sparking curiosity about his newly signed artist and launching his career to mainstream attention in a matter of months. The same definitely cannot be said for Drake's OVO Sounds roster, as there is not a single artist that can be deemed mainstream in the slightest, some of them even being, dare I say, irrelevant.
I want them to go fucking do what every other label does, which is take some of the millions of dollars they've made and go hire somebody to pay attention to every act signed to OVO, and make sure that there's some more attention paid when they're dropping a project.
PartyNextDoor was OVO's first official signee as a vocalist and producer. PND was probably the artist who has had the most success as a Drake signee, garnering a cult-like fan base in the R&B genre. However, he has still always been seen as an underdog in comparison to Drake, and many of his fans believe that he could have reached mainstream success if he never signed to OVO. And while PND and Drake have collaborated on a few occasions as artists on the same track, he is also known to be another one of Drake's frequent songwriters like Quentin Miller, such as mega hit Work featuring Rihanna. Now, who knows if the song would have charted nearly as high or at all if he kept it to himself, but at least he would have had the chance at glory that Drake received time and time again. ILoveMakonnen is the artist behind the 2015 hit song Tuesday, and while it is true that Drake hopped on the remix, exploding the song even further, the solo track with just Makonnen had already been an undeniable success without him. Regardless, somehow Drake finagled his way into splitting the royalties on the solo record as well, not on just the remix. Perhaps the deal Makonnen struck with OVO at the time felt more favorable, but according to him, as soon as the hype from the song died down, so too did Drake's interest in his career, even dropping him years later without much promotion or music to speak of. An interviewer from Variety asked Makonnen concerning Tuesday, which Drake released as a remix, "It's yours and OVO's biggest hit. You said in 2017 that they needed a hot song. That's it. Do you still believe that?" Makonnen says, "I mean, I don't know. I haven't talked to these people in years. Nobody's ever reached out to me, but that seems as if that was the reason. For me looking back and people telling me, they knew that I had the new wave, a new sound starting up, and they jumped on that to further their own wave. They didn't want to sustain and support me, only themselves. Besides, I only met Drake 3 times. We spoke maybe 5 times, never about my career, just about getting stuff done." Makonnen's statements in 2021 only strengthened suspicions of Drake's sweatshop operation at OVO. I mean, what label owner, or worse yet, fellow collaborator on the same track with the utmost control of another's career would treat them like that? And with Drake's reputation for Billboard hits every year, it would make sense that he and his managers would capitalize off an already proven song like Tuesday by any means. And it didn't help that when ILoveMakonnen wanted to finally release an album under his new label, OVO, Drake failed to be involved in any of the creative process, let alone promote it in the slightest. Makonnen further details his frustration with Drake and his label to Fader. "This when I got signed, he's all in my face telling me, 'You one of the greatest songwriters ever, da da da.' Just blowing me up, bro. And I'm the little kid from Tragedy right now. You could see it. It was written all over my face. I'm depressed as fuck. And then when I'm like, can y'all tweet out my mixtape? Can I get a feature? Can I get production? No, no, no. So I'm just sitting over here in prison. Am I in prison? So maybe OVO Sweatshop wasn't harsh enough of a term with how Drake treated ILoveMakonnen. Because in retrospect, all Drake really did for his career was boost his song Tuesday to number 12 on Billboard, meanwhile taking half or more of the earnings from the remix and the original song. Not to mention steal the sound and wave Makonnen created for himself as an independent artist to further his own career. Then drop him as soon as his name lost relevance from the lack of promotion that Drake provided. Drake just might be an evil genius. Quentin Miller is a ghostwriter and is mainly known for being involved in the largest blemish to Drake's career, at least at the time. However, before this, he was very much the opposite, still working in the shadows. No one on the outside even knew Quentin was ghostwriting for some of Drake's hit songs. His controversy escalated with the public feud between Drake and Meek Mill in 2015. Meek Mill pressed Drake after they collaborated on Rico, inquiring if the lyrics were about his current girlfriend at the time, Nicki Minaj, whom Drake has also had a long-term friendship with. But after finding out Drake didn't even write the lyrics to the song, Meek went ballistic. and publicly called him out, in the process exposing the actual writer behind the verse, Quentin Miller. At the time, this was a huge deal in hip-hop because a rapper's penmanship was still something rappers took pride in. Meek Mill felt like he got played. But what's worse is because of the whole scandal, all of Quentin Miller's contributions to Drake's career were brought to the spotlight, including one of Drake's most beloved mixtapes by fans. If you're reading this, it's too late, and almost destroying his career entirely due to raising questions about the authenticity of practically any and all of his music that he's released. Oh, and of course, the conditions within OVO, since, well, Quentin Miller obviously had the talent to make hits, yet still remained unknown behind the curtains at Drake's label. Regardless, the damage was already been done, and various sources began investigating deeper into alleged demanding working environments at his record label, though we're unsuccessful in finding any concrete evidence. Years later, during another public feud involving Drake, except this time with Pusha T, Quentin Miller was asked by a fan where his relationship with Drake stood at this point in time. He made it clear that his ties with Drake were strictly past tense, never doing anything with that guy again. I literally don't even care of that to become a thing. We're finished. He's doing him, I'm doing me, point blank. That's it though. Shit dead. Perhaps he was just glad he had finally escaped and wanted no other dealings with Drake after what had transpired. I mean, according to Quentin during his DJ Vlad TV interview, he apparently hadn't seen one back-end publishing check from any songs he wrote for Drake, merely a $30,000 advance when he signed, clearly much less than he deserved. But what most people don't realize is that Quentin Miller was actually signed to another organization entirely, under record producer and publisher Tricky Stewart. And actually, he claimed that Drake and his label would even pay him additionally under the table for Quentin to survive and provide for his family.
It was about to change my life, you know? Even though, you know, I was in my horrible publishing situation with Tricky, so I never got a publishing check off of any Drake songs.
Wait. You never got a publishing check off of any Drake song?
No. I had to feed my family off getting paid under the table in that situation because Tricky and them wouldn't let me go.
The next artist, or rather group, is Majid Jordan, a Lebanese-Canadian R&B duo, assigned to OVO back in 2013 to assist in the songwriting and producing for my all-time favorite Drake album, Nothing Was the Same. And funny enough, they actually compared Drake's studio sessions to a literal camp, sleeping in tents and not being able to leave.
They basically put us in a studio, and it was like a studio camp almost. There were tents in there. There were like people flying
beats.
in. Yeah,
Make
beats. Stay in the dungeon. Don't leave.
Like,
You cannot leave.
Literally tense.
You can't tell anyone you're working on this project.
Luckily, even with such conditions, Majid Jordan actually received feature credits on Hold On, We're Going Home on the album, in turn launching their career.
We're making beats for like a few months, and we eventually get to make Hold On. I write the words over a beat that's produced by this guy, Paul Jeffries, really talented producer, goes by 1985. He also produced Hotline Bling. And then we put it on a USB for Drake to drive home to one night. He drove home, we showed up the next day, and he had tracked it. And they're like, we love this song. You know, this is the one. And 40's sitting there with his arms up in the studio, and he's like, we got it. We've got the single.
So perhaps camping out of the studio was all worth it for them. Noel Fisher, otherwise known as Detail, pursued legal action against Drake in 2016 for essentially attempting to force him into an exclusive production contract with OVO after their collaborations on Nothing Was the Same, though Detail declined. Soon after, Drake invited him back to his house, giving off the impression that they would still work together, just not exclusively. However, according to Detail's dispute, when he arrived, Drake's bodyguard Chubbs answered the door and assaulted him, allegedly on Drake's orders. The attack left Detail hospitalized for several days with severe injuries, including a broken jaw requiring multiple surgeries. Detail requested Drake cover the medical expenses, but this time he refused, forcing Detail to file a lawsuit to be compensated for his injuries. Although mysteriously, Detail failed to appear to his court hearing, and consequently, the lawsuit was thrown out. And he hasn't spoken a word of the incident since. But speculation remains that Drake and his crew had something to do with it, such as threatening Detail with even more injuries. Drake referenced this situation in one of his tracks released in 2019, titled War, in a way confirming that it did happen on his orders. So even when Drake isn't successful in signing artists and producers to the Sweatshop, he can still ruin your life. Moji was another Toronto native rapper that had been and violently thrown away once his value had been emptied by OVO. Drake referred to him and his infamous dance moves in hit record Summer 16 and even used them in the music videos for Hotline Bling and Energy. Although Drake nor OVO ever technically signed Majid. Therefore, after a while, he felt he was owed some form of compensation for letting Drake run off with his iconic moves. Majid also shared some insight behind OVO seeking out new talent to write new hooks, flows, and bars for Drake's music. But similar to Detail, going public and speaking his truth resulted in violence. Majid posts pictures of his bloody and swollen face to Instagram, implying he was jumped on the orders of Drake for speaking out against him, and eventually deletes everything negative about the Six Gods soon after, all in exchange for $500, the only compensation he ever received from the record label ever. The final artist in the OVO Sweatshop is Smiley, certainly one of Drake's most questionable decisions due to Smiley's, let's say, unorthodox flows. It's trash, I just had to say it. The only reason Smiley has any sort of traction on streaming platforms is because of Drake featuring on his song Over the Top. And similar to the other Drake appearances like Look Alive with Blockboy JB, even though Drake was technically the feature, the song was basically his, especially when considering the length of his verses and choruses on these songs. And sure, Drake has posted a few pictures and Instagram stories promoting Smiley, but anyone in their right mind could tell you his music isn't going to translate into the mainstream, and it definitely hasn't. Smiley has had not one mainstream hit in years, at least solo, so what was the point? Some fans believe that Drake is simply giving back to his city by signing Toronto natives that have a little buzz, but at the same time, this also benefits him too, by maintaining his relevance and influence, keeping all the new artists under his wing, not too different from his previous artists already locked in the OVO Sweatshop, ILoveMakonnen, or even Forbats, whereby he remixes already bubbling or hot songs to demonstrate his dominance on the charts, even though these songs were already performing well without him. It's all a status play, but in hip-hop, that makes all the difference in perception. Given all the career atrocities Drake already has on his record, a few artists were smart enough to think longer term, what exactly it means to be signed to a superstar artist with literally no successful artists under his label. These artists saw past the guaranteed money behind giving up their own artistry to continue Drake's, and in some cases, the coveted Drake feature that could set them up for life. But is that really what they wanted? The Weeknd is the most listened artist in the world in 2024 on Spotify, but regardless, before his rise to extreme fame, he was a relatively unknown Canadian R&B artist and songwriter assisting Drake with his early projects. Drake discovered his music in 2010 and had 2 of his songs posted on his October's Very Own blog. A year later, The Weeknd released his debut mixtape, House of Balloons, and started working with Drake on his upcoming album, Take Care. And while The Weeknd appeared as a feature on the songs Crew Love and The Ride, he was also credited for songwriting contributions on a few other tracks like Cameras, Shot For Me, among others. In 2013, The Weeknd told Complex, "I gave up almost half of my album. It's hard. I will always be thankful. If it wasn't for the light he shined on me, who knows where I'd be, and everything happens for a reason. You never know what I would say if this success wasn't in front of me now." And despite Drake's efforts to sign him officially to the OVO Sound record label after Take Care's momentum, The Weeknd had different arrangements. He used the buzz from his Drake collabs to partner with Republic Records and create his own imprint, XO, a competing force to OVO, in which he could sign his own artists. Soon after the deal went public, Drake responded on Twitter, "You won't get away with just a thank you. You owe me a favor." He felt betrayed, beat at his own game. He gave the spotlight to an upcoming artist, but couldn't lock them into a deal to bear the fruit he had planted. So I understand his frustration. But on the other hand, The Weeknd was responsible for a large proportion of arguably one of Drake's most iconic projects of all time. Seems like a fair trade to me. Just because Drake was early to discover The Weeknd's talents doesn't mean he owns him. I mean, think about how limited he could have been if he was signed to another artist. And now, they compete for the same number of Billboard hits, selling out arena tour stops worldwide. The Weeknd is one of the most successful artists ever.
He just really came to me at one point, came to all of us and was like, look, like I don't want to sign under another artist because I feel like I could be just as big or bigger.
And looking back, not signing to OVO was probably one of the best decisions he has ever made in his entire career. And speaking of hopping on trends, Ice Spice turned out to be another Drake blunder. And while no evidence exists that Drake wanted to actually sign her to OVO, he was definitely impressed with her recent rise to fame, publicly following and DMing her that he messed with her music. In fact, he also flew her out to his OVO Fest in Toronto Toronto. If you ask me, the sight of Ice Spice had Drake motivated, whether he just wanted to hit or he just wanted her to become the next OVO signee. But something certainly did not go his way, for after nothing business or personal resulted from their time together, Drake unfollowed her. And did we really think either of those two options would have ended well? As we can already see, she's doing just alright on her own with barely any music out. Also, we need to give credit to Ice Spice's team that have protected her from all controversy and have allowed her to make all the right moves in the industry. After all, they were smart enough to refuse whatever Drake may have offered. Bryson Tiller seemingly blew up out of nowhere with his SoundCloud hit Don't, that eventually made its way onto every hip-hop, R&B, and pop radio station. Expectedly, Drake offered him a record deal, but Bryson Tiller turned it down. He was conflicted on quite possibly the biggest decision of his entire life. Does he sign to Drake to potentially be overshadowed, or simply because OVO lacks the infrastructure to support any artists other than Drake? I mean, Bryson Tiller had already signed to 2 independent labels before, and neither of them worked out. But signing to RCA Records, he would have had a whole team. He talked to 40 about it. Even 40 was like, this is not a bad deal from RCA, so we just did it. Bryson Tiller decided to take his odds as a solo artist without the help of Drake. And whether or not his career is panned out greater in comparison to if he had signed OVO, at least he's working for himself. Most recently, Bryson Tiller has had a top 20 hit with his solo song Whatever She Wants, and he did it all on his own. For in all likelihood, he would have been in the studio writing songs for Drake's last few projects like the rest of them. Popcaan is a Jamaican singer who featured on Drake's Controlla. It was the first dancehall artist signed to OVO. Drake hopped on the entire dancehall trend due to Popcaan's growing buzz. Popcaan got multiple career boosting features from Drake, but he didn't feel like he was as supported on his own endeavors and career. In fact, his last album under OVO, Great Is He, debuted at a lower rank in sales than his previous 4 studio projects despite featuring Drake. Not to mention the incident with Wiley, a UK artist, attempting to clear features for a Popcaan and Nicki Minaj collab, but was unsuccessful due to issues with the label. Wiley then calls out OVO Sound on behalf of Popcaan on Twitter. Don't ever sign to OVO Sound, they give you shit record deals and you're only there to help Drake with songs to keep him up and you down. Set up for you to fail. He follows up, tagging Popcaan. They said they won't clear your verse because you ain't giving them any music for your own project. In early 2023, Popcaan then left OVO, telling Crack Magazine, the label can be weird sometimes. I love the label, but I don't like them. I'll be independent soon. Popcaan may have learned his lesson. The signing under another artist, no matter who it is, may not be the best option, as what worked for them may not work for their artist. He wanted to utilize Drake's platform to launch the entire genre of dancehall into the mainstream, and it definitely worked, however, only for Drake's songs. So all that Popcaan really amounted to under OVO was yet another stepping stone for Drake to maintain his status as the biggest rapper in the world, capitalizing from various cultures by commercializing them. It wouldn't be the first time Drake hopped on a trending sound and received all the credit for making it popular. In March 2024, Forbats reportedly signed a distribution deal for his new EP with Drake. Drake just did a remix of his hit song Act 2, dated 8, and just like some other OVO signees, Forbats' song was already viral in his own right due to the juxtaposition between his street appearance and high-pitched R&B vocals. Yet again, this caused fans to wonder why artists keep letting Drake get away with hopping on the trends they have created when we've already seen all of OVO's other victims. Forbats allegedly only signed a distribution deal for 1 EP, so if the partnership isn't the right fit or the EP doesn't stream like they're hoping it will, they can always part ways. As of now, if one looks at the album's metadata for his newest project, there is no OVO Sound listed as a distributor though. Drake's remix is also not on the album. Instead, there is the Act 3 remix with Kanye. Drake and Kendrick's beef also took a lot of the spotlight away from his debut studio project, in which he tweeted, "Yo, Kendrick Lamar, I just dropped my tape. Can I get 24 hours at least?" Now, obviously, this isn't entirely Drake's fault, but still, it's just something to note. Is the entire label evil and maliciously signing artists for the sole purpose of sustaining Drake's career? Or does that just end up happening for various reasons? Because what it looks like is every artist who signs to the label ends up never amounting to much under their own name. And as soon as Drake has siphoned all the influence he can take from new artists out of Toronto to perpetuate his next leg of his career, you never hear from them again. If that's actually the case, then Drake and 40 are evil geniuses, especially when they have easy bait for upcoming artists of the prized Drake feature that could skyrocket their career with only one song. And better yet, many of the times Drake doesn't even fulfill this promise. I mean, if they made a hit record, why wouldn't he just take it for himself rather than bog down the potential from featuring on an unknown artist track? Oh, and if you call out the operation publicly, Drake will send out his minions. It all seems like a trap. Noisy stated, It's looking like the dream they're selling is sexy art direction and clutch credits on the Boss's album. OVO Sound is excellent at the business of making Drake albums, but not yet the no-brainer star-making force up north it could be, possibly because the tightest songs get run up the pipeline and placed at the feet of the sixth god. But what if, on the other hand, OVO is actually trying to promote their artist careers, but just suck at it? After all, Drake emerged as the top rapper over a decade ago and was launched into the scene by Lil Wayne, the highest selling rapper at the time. Now yes, Drake is currently in the same situation as Lil Wayne now, spotlighting new artists as the top dog, but to be fair, the music industry has changed. Cosigns are less effective due to multiple reasons. For one, social media and streaming platforms are continually increasing the competition for artists and creators as the barrier to entry of uploading music online becomes easier and easier. But more importantly, social media has democratized sharing of music. Any regular citizen can grow a following or simply just share what type of music they're listening to, in turn influencing others. No longer are massive media publishers and radio stations the gatekeepers to upcoming talent, and therefore Drake, or any large artist cosign for that matter, isn't really worth as much as it once was when information was more centralized. And let's not forget that Drake is still just an artist. Yes, OVO is his brand, but he has his own career to worry about, especially in recent times. And the employees of the label, in addition to the artists, are the ones who are supposed to utilize his brand in order to push their own career. He can't do everything. At the same time though, given it is his brand, it is his responsibility to hire the correct people to be able to handle new artists and their development. As for the accusations of exploiting his artists to make him hit songs rather than let them succeed, I could go either way. It is a safer bet to funnel all the hit songs to Drake for nearly guaranteed success. But longevity wise, which I think Drake is truly after, to prove he's the best artist on the planet and can put on any artist he wants to because he is just that influential, that wouldn't make sense. Drake has enough hits and he's pushing 40 years old at this point, already discussing slowing down and or retirement. At this stage in his career, I believe his goals all the more align with letting his artists have their own hits. But perhaps this was his strategy early on. Regardless, Baka explains his perspective on the matter.
Pundits, people who talk online about music say is that they try to say, oh, OVO, if you end up signing with OVO, you end up giving your best shit to Drake. Do you think that there's any truth to that?
Nah.
Do you think you're seeing it from a different perspective because you weren't like hired as a songwriter or a producer or something?
Nah, I just know him as an individual, you know? He's not gonna, especially if a man's like, okay, so let me put myself in the situation then. I make a hit song and he knows it's a hit song for me. He's not gonna come and be like, yo, I need that song. He's not gonna do that. I 100% I know that. And I've never even heard of him doing anything like that. So
Right.
my personal take on it is I don't know him to be like that.
Right.
You know, he wants his artists to thrive and to flourish and to be great. He wants that. Like everybody at OVO wants that.
And what's crazy though is that to a lot of people who may have a less mature perspective, they would say, well, why didn't he hop on your song when it was blowing up? But I think the reality is that yeah, that would have made the song bigger, but he probably wouldn't have been doing you any favors in the long run because getting under that massive microscope that quickly is
sometimes.
We've seen a lot of people whose careers couldn't handle the weight of the Drake feature.
Exactly.
In conclusion, it is a given fact that if you're an artist as big as Drake, you are bound to wrong some people to get to that position. Drake used many artists as writers and producers to drop as many hits as possible throughout his career. For this reason, OVO can be seen as a sweatshop. However, is it even fair to compare any OVO signees to Drake due to his impossibly large success? We have to remember record labels like OVO are a business and will invest in the most valuable asset they have. In this case, that is Drake. Why would they risk money on artists that could fail when whatever song Drake makes is guaranteed millions of streams without much marketing? Maybe the OVO label is not really a label at all, but just a springboard to boost Drake's career since he has been so successful. The majority of people would agree that Drake mistreated the artists on his label, and this is a testimony to Drake's character that has heavily been questioned in recent times during his beef with Kendrick Lamar, Future, Metro Boomin, and damn near the entire industry. So not only Drake, but also OVO Sound as a label may need to change their tactics, as they very well may have an army of sweatshop prisoners ready to expose any and everything going on behind the shadows.